The story begins by showing a woman named Ling heading to the school where she teaches in Singapore. Ling is a dedicated teacher, although the Mandarin lessons she teaches don't always seem to interest the children. After she finished teaching, Ling returned to her home, where she lived with her husband and her father-in-law, who had a stroke. Because she had to go to work every day, Ling hired a nanny to take loving care of her father-in-law. Even though she was busy, Ling always gently took care of her father-in-law before and after work. In the evening, Ling and her father-in-law waited expectantly for her husband's return. It wasn't until recently that he came home late at night, or not at all. The next day, Ling went alone to a hospital to check her fertility. The doctor told her that she was in her fertile period, and the doctor hoped that Ling and her husband could try again to have a child. While going home, Ling accidentally met one of his students, Wei Lun, who was going for treatment. Since Wei Lun was going alone, Ling offered to take him home in his car. On the way, Ling learned that Wei Lun often lived alone, as her parents often went on business trips abroad. Ling listened to Wei Lun's story without comment, and both were caught up in their own thoughts. Daily with regular injections of fertility hormones, and the pain has become part of her life. Ling was looking out of the window in class when she didn't realize that Wei Lun was silently photographing her from behind. The next day, when Ling was holding an exam, she suddenly received a call from her sister, who was waiting for her outside the school. As soon as Ling left the class, almost all of her students left, except Wei Lun, who stayed in class. It turned out that Ling's sister was a durian seller. Even though her business often didn't sell, Ling always gave her money. As a token of gratitude, her sister gave Ling a bag of durians. When Ling returned to the classroom, she wasn't surprised to see that some students had left, and she continued the lesson. Sometime later, Ling noticed that Wei Lun was always looking at the durian he was carrying. When Ling realized that Wei Lun was starving, he invited him to eat durian with him. Their relationship began to grow closer from then on. In the evening, as per the doctor's advice, Ling waited for her husband to make love, but he refused the invitation and said that they had been doing it for 8 years without success. The next day, Ling asked her husband to take care of her father, as the nanny didn't come, and she had to go to work. At the school office, Wei Lun asked Ling for permission to postpone the test because she wanted to attend martial arts training, and Ling immediately gave permission. Out of curiosity, Ling went to the training ground and saw that Wei Lun was very enthusiastic about training, at which time Ling was reminded of his youthful vigor without any burden. When the next class was over, only Wei Lun came. A few moments later, Ling got a call from her aunt, who told her to go home immediately and take care of her in-laws. Because Wei Lun said that the class was not finished, Ling hurriedly took Wei Lun home to her house. There, Wei Lun was very surprised to see the paralyzed condition of Ling's father-in-law. Even though he was old and paralyzed, Ling's father-in-law still had a sharp brain, as evidenced when Wei Lun was doing assignments, and was helped by Ling's father-in-law. Afterwards, they ate together like a family, and the atmosphere was very warm with Wei Lun's presence. The next day, while Ling was injecting hormones, she accidentally fell asleep in the car. A few moments later, the principal came and woke her up, and seeing Ling's weak and pale condition, he immediately allowed her to go home and rest at home. A few days later, Ling again came to the hospital alone, without her husband, because her husband refused yesterday. She decided to try IVF, but the doctor there advised her to use the latest seeds when Ling tried to call her husband. He didn't pick up the phone at all, and she was forced to undergo IVF alone. A few days later, Ling was on her way home with Wei Lun when she suddenly got a call from the doctor, saying that her IVF had failed. Ling, who heard the news, could only stay silent, and immediately stopped the car. Then he played music very loudly. Ling felt very sad for all the suffering he had experienced. The next day, it was time for Wei Lun to participate in the competition, which was watched by Ling, who came with her in-laws. In the competition, Wei Lun managed to show a very stunning performance and won first place. After the match, Ling invited Wei Lun to celebrate her success by going out to eat durian with her in-laws. At home, when Ling was checking her schoolwork, she suddenly smiled when she saw Wei Lun's name, until she didn't realize that the pen ink had soaked the paper. Since her closeness to Wei Lun, Ling has regained her enthusiasm for life. The next day, when Ling was on the street, she accidentally saw her husband making out with a woman, although she had long suspected her husband of cheating on her, and felt guilty for not being able to give her a child. Seeing it with her own eyes left Ling devastated. After that, Ling went home to take care of her in-laws. There, Ling could not help but be deeply saddened, and she only wanted a man who sincerely loved her. Her in-laws, who saw their daughter-in-law sad, could only gesture for Ling to keep smiling. Then, when Ling woke up from her sleep, she heard a baby crying and immediately held the baby, but it turned out to be a false dream. When it started to rain, Ling called out to her mother-in-law, but there was no response. Finally, Ling realized that her mother-in-law had died and couldn't help but grieve. A few days later, Ling returned to teaching as usual. After finishing teaching, Ling drove Wei Lun back to his house until, in front of Wei Lun's house, he saw Wei Lun was having a nosebleed. Worrying about Wei Lun's condition, Ling decided to accompany him into the house. Ling, who had not felt the joy of sex for a long time, finally returned to it together with his student. After that incident, Wei Lun was very ambitious to get the love of his teacher. Every day he waited for Ling in the office, and this made the teacher there curious about their relationship. But uncomfortable with Wei Lun's excessive attention, Ling finally got angry and said that everything that happened before was just a misunderstanding. On the way home, Wei Lun, who was still disappointed with Ling's rejection, forced Ling out of the car, making Ling lose concentration and hit the vehicle in front of her. Wei Lun, who was disappointed because his love was rejected, immediately left Ling. The next day, Ling went to school by bus, and suddenly Wei Lun approached and apologized for yesterday's incident. At school, Wei Lun smiled to himself while looking at the photo of Ling that was secretly taken on his cell phone. But suddenly, his ignorant friend took Wei Lun's cell phone, and Wei Lun's secret was revealed. As a result of the incident, Wei Lun was called by the principal and asked why the photos were on his cell phone, but Wei Lun himself could only remain silent, after which the principal called Ling and showed the photos that Wei Lun had taken. Ling was fired from school for this incident. After that, they went home together, and in the car, Wei Lun really wanted to hug her teacher, but Ling refused by turning her face away. A few moments later, it rained. Wei Lun immediately got out of the car and was followed by Ling. In the end, they hugged each other, and that was the last time they met. Long story short, Ling and her husband officially separated after 8 years of childless marriage. A few days later, with the curiosity of a possible pregnancy still haunting her, Ling decided to take another pregnancy test, and to her great surprise, she finally found out she was pregnant after years of waiting. This success is ultimately the fruit of Wei Lun's hard work. At the end of the movie, we see Ling returning to his hometown in Malaysia with new hope, and the movie is over.